Phil Twyford.
Well, we took the mickey out of the Honourable Maurice Williamson earlier this afternoon for bringing the plumbers, gas fitters and drain layers bill to the House, and a number of us commented then that it was a curious use of the House's time to be dealing with the minutiae of plumbers and gas fitters and drain layers when there are so many pressing economic, social and environmental problems facing the country. But to be honest, compared to that bill, sir, this bill is the work of an intellectual midget. Pygmy. Midget, pygmy. Chris Oakenfold would have us believe that the choice facing this country, sir, is one between no work or work on reduced wages. Is that really what John Key's brighter future has come to? This is the choice we face as a country. Either our young people should be paid to stay at home all day, or they should be prepared to take a cut in wages and be paid less than the next person for doing exactly the same work. That is the kind of vision that Chris Oakenfold has for this country, and that is where John Key's brighter future has got to. It's depressing, sir. It's depressing to be standing in this House on a Thursday afternoon debating a bill brought to this House by a political party that is so bankrupt of ideas, so utterly lacking in any kind of creative thinking about this country's future and how we build prosperity, how we increase productivity, how we unleash the potential of our young people, that this is the best that they can do. And if this is Simon Bridges' attempt at a career-advancing move, then I hope he's got some other ideas in his back pocket, sir, because this bill is based on the flimsiest of logic, the flimsiest of policy. The idea that if you cut the wages down to from $13.50 or $13.75 down to $11 for 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who have been on the dole for 6 months, that somehow you'll create new jobs. That is what this bill is based on. It's pretty simple for the folks at home who are listening to this if they've just tuned in. That's really all they need to know. The National Party is cutting the take-home wages down to $11 an hour for young people between the ages of 16 and 19 who have been on the unemployment benefit for 6 months. That is their solution to the unemployment crisis that's facing this country. What a depressing, depressing thing. To create a financial incentive for employers to hire one group of workers over another. It won't create a single new job. It will simply displace employment from one group to another. And this is the extent of the National Party's vision for tackling the jobs crisis. The other thing that I find really dispiriting about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that people in this country need hope. They need hope that there's a place for them, that there's a future for them and their families in this country. The fact that so many people are heading to the airport and heading off to Australia and further afield, looking for opportunity and looking for hope, is surely a wake-up call, sir. 180,000 people have left this country under the National Party's policies of the last 4 years. They can't find a stadium big enough to fit in the equivalent number of people, sir, to signify how many people have gone to Australia. And interestingly, we don't hear much from John Key these days talking about how many New Zealanders are heading to Australia, but 5 years ago that was all he wanted to talk about. But now, sir, that we see a bill that comes to this House to cut the wages of our young people. What will be the result? Surely they will save up their $11 an hour and so they can buy an airfare to get to Australia. It shouldn't surprise us that the National Party, their first response for any major problem is to cut wages. It's what they do. It's what the National Party has always done. And if you go back through the history of this country, the predecessors of the National Party, their idea for a depression-busting policy was to create work camps in the countryside, and they shipped unemployed men and women off to those camps to work at starvation wages. That was their idea of a policy to deal with the depression.
Now they're paying FBT on the accommodation.
Yep, that's right, as Mr Cunliffe says, and now they're paying fringe benefit tax on the accommodation, exactly. It was the National Party who was responsible for the policies of the 1990s to smash the trade union movement of this country, to get rid of the minimum wage and to drive down wages. And my God, they succeeded. And we are dealing today, sir, with the legacy of those policies that made New Zealand a low-wage economy. And yet when the campaign came around in 2008, sir, the National Government, the National Party of the time under John Key, campaigned on the idea of closing the wage and salary gap with Australia. And yet time after time after time, they do whatever they possibly can to drive down wages. We've seen the pathetic increases to the minimum wage that this government has presided over. We've seen the 90-day bill, which surely has one objective in mind, and that's to create insecurity for New Zealand workers, to make them fear for their jobs, and so doing to drive down the cost of labour. And then this bill, sir, is another example in that great National Party tradition to lower the cost of wages. Because National only has one tool in the toolbox. Whatever the problem, let's cut the cost of labour. That's all they know how to do. And what an irony that they campaigned so hard about closing the wage gap with Australia, and yet we've been hearing it day after day in the House, sir, that the wage and salary gap under National, the gap between New Zealand and Australia has actually increased. What we need, sir, is bold leadership in this country to tackle the jobs crisis. And I'm going to tell you some of the policies that if National had any kind of curiosity about the policies that would solve the jobs crisis, they would be contemplating, for example, restoring the research and development tax credits so that New Zealand companies had the incentive to lift their game and invest in innovation and productivity through research and development. They would be considering, the members on that side of the House, reform to monetary policy that would stop the endless round of squeezing the lifeblood out of our exporters every time the economy showed some kind of life. Instead of the Reserve Bank Governor having this single focus on controlling inflation, they would be considering, the National MPs would be considering a monetary policy that took into account economic growth, that took into account jobs and exports. But no, they won't consider that. They would be considering skills and apprenticeships that would invest in our young people, not cut their wages and take away their employment rights, but actually invest in skills and apprenticeships. There is no reason in today's world that young people should be paid to stay at home or to go to work and have their wages cut. We've seen an increase, sir, in the number of young people. We've seen an increase in the number of young people who are not in education, employment or in training. 30,000 under 20-year-olds not in education, employment or training, and that's 4,000 more than when this government took office. If this government was interested in a jobs policy, they would be far more wholehearted about tackling the procurement policy that sees jobs shipped offshore constantly and the gutting of New Zealand's high-value manufacturing industry. They would consider a capital gains tax, sir, that would tilt the playing field back in favour of the productive economy, away from wasteful investment in rental real estate and into businesses that will produce jobs and livelihoods for New Zealanders. But no, they're not interested. They're not interested in industry policy, sir, that would look at how the state can actively partner with New Zealand firms and exporters to grow jobs and grow productivity in this country. Their idea of an industry policy, sir, is getting problem gamblers to fund Auckland's new convention centre. That's their idea. Selling our employment law to Hollywood corporations, taking away the work rights of New Zealand workers at the behest of Hollywood. That's this government's idea of a jobs policy, sir. It's not good enough, and New Zealanders demand something better.
Simon O'Connor.
Well, what an array of